I exited the diner with a takeout bag of fries and burgers. It was snowing heavily during the time I was there. I also thought about my friend Brent's advice not to go driving at night because of the storm currently happening outside. But because I was so stubborn and unafraid at the time, I thought nothing could happen, so I went anyway. It took me a while to set up the truck and get going, but I was already on the road by then, with the cargo box linked behind my truck. At first, everything was as expected. Other cars passing by, cutting me off, and whatever else you experience while driving. I've been at this job for many years, to the point where I can read a person's judgment while driving. I've witnessed horrible accidents, storms, and chases. I could tell hundreds of stories. But none of those are as creepy or as vile as this one. I was on my way to the freeway, but when I got there, the entrance was closed off. It could possibly have been due to repairs or refurbishment. A situation like this was just annoying because I had to figure out where to reroute and which roads to take in order to get back on track. So, I pulled over to the side and looked through my phone to search for nearby roads. Immediately, the Google Maps app showed me another road I could drive on not too far from the freeway. I immediately drove off onto the road again. The storm was getting worse, and the snow was getting thicker, but I still drove. After a few minutes of driving, I entered a road full of trees on both sides, with the road splitting down the middle. My headlights were the only thing keeping me from crashing, as it was almost pitch black out there. At that moment, I was feeling unbothered and just doing my own thing to calm my nerves. That all shattered when my headlights suddenly shined their bright lights on a deer standing in the middle of the road. I pressed hard on the brakes and swerved left and right, eventually bringing the truck to a stop. I was shocked, trying to get myself together before walking out of my truck. Luckily, my truck wasn't badly damaged, but I had to check the cargo box too. Unfortunately, it had fallen off the truck and was lying in the middle of the road. I was furious, angry that now my chance of getting paid had just flown out the window. The only thing I could really think of doing at that time was calling my friend Brent. Right after texting my friend Brent, I heard a noise just outside my truck. It took me a second to process what I had just heard, but I looked around through my side mirrors and the windshield. Nothing. Another sound occurred, and looked to my left into the deep, dark woods. For a mere second, I thought I saw a pair of glowing eyes. I blinked once, and they were gone. I stood still for a moment, still staring out into the woods, trying to figure out whether I had actually seen something, or if my eyes were simply playing tricks on me. Now, this is where you'll probably get mad at me, because what I did afterwards was definitely not staying in the truck. I grabbed a flashlight and got out of my truck to investigate the noise in the woods. Looking back, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe it was my pride. Whatever was standing out there wasn't going to be the thing that made me turn around. I turned on my flashlight and continued my search through the woods. I saw nothing at first, just piles of snow I was struggling to walk through, and endless dead trees. The beam of my flashlight swept across the ground as I continued forward, occasionally stopping whenever I thought I heard something moving. Then I noticed something. A small red droplet sat on top of the snow. I stopped walking. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe some dirt had gotten mixed into the snow, or perhaps the light from my flashlight was playing tricks on me. I took another step and noticed another red mark a few feet ahead. Then another. I crouched down and pointed my flashlight at it. It was blood. My stomach tightened. I followed the trail, shining my flashlight farther into the woods. The marks became more frequent as I went. What started as tiny droplets had turned into larger stains scattered across the snow. That was when the fear finally hit me. Real fear. I hadn't felt that kind of fear in years. Not from the storms, not from the accidents, not even from the situations that had nearly gotten me killed. But standing there alone in those woods, staring at a trail of blood that seemed to disappear deeper into the darkness, I suddenly wished I had stayed inside my truck. I should have turned around. Instead, I kept following it. The trail eventually led me behind a cluster of trees. I raised my flashlight, expecting to find something I probably wasn't ready to see. And there it was. A deer. It was lying motionless in the snow, partially covered by the fresh snowfall. I stood there silently, staring at it. I took another step closer, raising my flashlight toward the deer. Something immediately felt wrong. The deer wasn't just injured. Its body was covered in deep wounds. Long, uneven gashes ran across its side, cutting through its fur in several places. The marks were too narrow and too deep to have come from my truck. I slowly moved the flashlight over its body. There were several more. 3 long cuts ran almost parallel along its ribs, followed by another set lower down. The fur around the wounds was matted with blood, and chunks of it had been torn away completely. One of its legs had several deep scratches running down it, as if something with long claws had grabbed onto it. I stared at the wounds. My truck hadn't done this. A collision would have left bruises, broken bones, maybe cuts from the impact. But these weren't like that. These looked like claw marks. I swallowed hard. The snow around the deer was disturbed, as if something had dragged it through the woods before leaving it there. There were patches of blood scattered several feet away from the body, partially covered by the falling snow. I slowly backed away. I was thinking about what could have done this, and whether it was still somewhere nearby. I continued walking through the snow, my flashlight sweeping across the trees in front of me. Every step was becoming harder. The snow was getting deeper, and the cold was starting to creep through my clothes. Then I heard something. It sounded like someone panicking. I stopped immediately. My flashlight moved from tree to tree as I tried to figure out where the sound was coming from. "Hello?" I said. Nothing. I slowly turned around, shining my flashlight behind me. That's when, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone. A figure. It was far away, standing between the trees. I quickly turned my flashlight toward it. Nothing. The figure was gone. I stood there for a moment, confused. Then I heard a voice. "Help!" I froze. I heard it talk again. "I'm trapped here." It was faint, but I could hear it clearly. A woman. I started walking toward the sound. "Hello," I called out. "Where are you?" No answer. I kept going. Every time I thought I was getting closer, the voice seemed to come from somewhere else. I pushed through the snow, stepping around trees and branches as I tried to follow it. I heard another panic. I stopped. The voice was much closer now. I shined my flashlight around. Nothing. Then I heard it again. "Please, help me." I slowly turned toward a large tree a few feet away. The voice was coming from behind it. I approached cautiously. "Hey," I called out. "Are you hurt?" Silence. I stopped. "Ma'am." Nothing. I stared at the tree. Why was she hiding behind it? I took another step. "I'm not going to hurt you. The cops are coming. Help is coming." "Okay." Still nothing. I raised my flashlight toward the tree. "Just come out where I can see you," I said. The voice suddenly returned. "Please." It sounded closer, almost directly behind the tree. I swallowed. "Okay, I'm gonna come around." I slowly stepped to the side. The first thing I saw were antlers. They rose above the top of the tree, far too large to belong to any normal animal. I stopped breathing. Then the rest of it slowly came into view. It wasn't a person. Its body looked wrong. Its limbs were unnaturally long and twisted, with joints that seemed bent in places they shouldn't have been. Its body shifted strangely as it stood, almost as if its bones had been dislocated and forced back into place. The shape of a human was there, but whatever stood in front of me was anything but human. I couldn't move. The thing slowly lifted its head. My flashlight caught its face. I felt my entire body go cold. The voice I'd been following wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from that thing. I took one step backward, then another. The creature suddenly let out a horrible screech. I turned around and ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I pushed through the snow as fast as I could, branches whipping against my face and my boots sinking with every step. Behind me, I heard another screech. I ran harder. Whatever was behind me didn't matter. I kept running, barely able to feel my legs anymore. My breath came out in short, panicked bursts as I pushed through the snow, desperate to get back to the road. Then I heard something behind me. A loud crunch of footsteps in the snow. Before I could turn around completely, something swung toward me. A claw nearly slashed across my back, missing me by inches. I stumbled forward, almost falling into the snow, but forced myself to keep running. I didn't look back again. A few seconds later, I saw something through the trees. Lights. Red and blue lights. Sirens. A police car was driving down the road. I immediately ran toward it, stumbling out onto the road and waving my arms to get their attention. The police car stopped, and the officers quickly rushed over to me, asking if I was okay and what had happened. I could barely catch my breath. I told them that something had chased me through the woods and pointed toward where I had come from. I looked back. Nothing. There was no figure standing between the trees. No movement. Nothing but the snow falling through the darkness. I pointed toward the woods, showing the officers where I had seen it. One of them immediately went to investigate, while the other stayed with me. The relief I felt was almost overwhelming. For the first time since I had entered those woods, I didn't feel completely alone. My legs were still shaking, my heart was pounding, and I was struggling to catch my breath. But seeing those police lights made me feel like I had finally escaped whatever had been chasing me. A few minutes ago, I had been running through the darkness with no idea whether I was going to make it back to the road. Now there were people around me who could actually help. I didn't care whether they believed everything I told them. I didn't care if they searched the woods and found nothing. I was just grateful someone had shown up. The officer eventually returned after checking the area, but there was no sign of anyone, or anything, out there. I gave them a description of what I had seen, explaining the large antlers, the unnatural body, and the way it moved. Even while describing it, I could hear how impossible it sounded. Afterward, the officers helped me deal with the broken, loose cargo box that had fallen from my truck. Once everything was taken care of, they told me to wait inside my truck while they continued checking the area. I climbed back into the driver's seat and shut the door behind me. For the first time that night, I felt somewhat safe. I sat there quietly, staring through the windshield as the snow continued to fall. Then my phone vibrated. I looked down. It was a text message from Brent. Right after texting Brent, I heard screaming coming from the woods. I froze in my seat. The screams were distant, but they were unmistakably human. Before I could process what I was hearing, several gunshots echoed through the trees. I stared through the windshield, trying to see where they were coming from. The snow was falling heavily, making it almost impossible to see very far into the woods. Then, I saw them. 2 glowing eyes. The same eyes I had seen earlier. They were staring directly at me from deep within the trees. I sat completely still. The eyes slowly moved closer. Branches shifted as something stepped out from the darkness. Then I saw it. The antlers appeared first, followed by its twisted, unnatural body. It stepped farther into view, its long limbs hanging strangely from its body as it stood there in the snow. It was the same thing I had seen earlier, now knowing it as the Wendigo, the thing I had been running from. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. Then I looked toward the woods, where the officers had gone. They still hadn't returned. The screaming and gunshots suddenly made sense. They were dead. I was alone. The creature remained standing there, staring at my truck. I stared back at it for a few seconds. Then I thought to myself, fuck this. I immediately started the truck and put it into gear and drove off. The tires spun against the snow before finally gaining traction, and I sped down the road as quickly as I could. I refused to look back. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't know how far I drove. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the road signs and just kept driving. The storm eventually began to weaken, and the trees slowly disappeared behind me. Then I saw lights. A city. There were cars everywhere, people walking along the sidewalks, and buildings lit up against the darkness. I slowed down and finally pulled into a parking lot, surrounded by other vehicles. I sat there for a while, staring through the windshield. I made it. For the second time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. But the relief didn't erase what I had seen. I kept thinking about the woods, the glowing eyes, the voice pretending to be a woman asking for help, the deer covered in wounds that couldn't have come from my truck, the Wendigo and the officers. I could still hear the gunshots. I could still remember waiting for them to come back, only to realize they never would. Those images stayed with me. I knew they weren't going to disappear the moment I got home. I knew I'd probably wake up in the middle of the night, remembering that thing standing between the trees. I'd probably hear a branch snap somewhere outside and immediately think about the woods. But I also knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life running from it. Eventually, I'd have to tell someone. I'd tell Brent everything. I'd tell my family and the people closest to me what happened that night, even if they didn't believe every part of it. Maybe they'd think the exhaustion, the storm, and the fear had gotten to me. Maybe I'd even start questioning myself. But I knew what I saw. I knew what chased me. And I knew those officers were out there because of me. It would take time, but eventually I'd return to a normal life. I'd go back to work. I'd drive again. I'd see snow without immediately thinking about that night. At least, that's what I hoped, because the worst part wasn't knowing that something like that existed. It was knowing that I had seen it with my own eyes. And for a while, I was afraid that remembering it over and over would eventually drive me insane. But I wouldn't let it. That would have to be enough. For now,